and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
I am Larry.
I'm Kaila. I'm Tori.
And I'm Josh. And I'm sure that you and everybody else on the panel are wondering why I am wearing this headband.
Boy, are we.
I wanted to show off my Christmas gifts that some of the gladiators got me. And this one is from Sarah Scheidt, who has taken part in the 10th season, and she'll be taking part in this season later on as well. And I wanted to
read your books at night.
Yep, this is if I want to read my books in the dark. This is if I'm in a car, if I'm riding in a car in the dark, or if I'm riding anywhere in the dark.
Give us a sweet demonstration of the. Oh
Yes.
my God!
Hey, just go look at the driver.
I can see the pages perfectly.
Help! This is a bad.
Turn it back on.
Oh God! I'm blind.
It's like a spotlight was on everybody. Let's meet the panel.
Okay.
That's literally what I thought he was doing.
We gotta give us a light guide next.
I also got this very nice bookmark from Sarah Zorns. She made this for me, and she also made one for Ari.
Oh,
Aw,
nice.
that's very pretty.
Very nice one. I collect bookmarks, so. And would Dan, would you be able to get that Sherlock Holmes Brain Games book for me?
While we're at it,
Right there.
I'm still seeing spots.
Thank you. This was a very thoughtful Brain Games Sherlock Holmes themed book that I got from Jesse.
I thought it was so cool.
So I want to thank everybody for their very generous gifts and thoughts. And today we are going to be going over a book that Larry suggested, in Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Larry, you have a discussion starter?
Yes. So the society that is painted in this is described as a dystopian society by many.
Mm-hmm.
Whether Huxley felt that way might be a little ambiguous. But my question to start this thing off is what aspects of the Brave New World described in this book do you find to be repellent,
Repellent?
if any?
As in applicable to today?
No, as in
Just in general.
yeah, like what about this dystopian story is dystopian to you?
I think the part that gave me, I had to, stop and, are you sure? Was, the Bokanovsky process. Not for me. No
you
thanks.
mean the process, the little Albert-esque process, or where they train them to not like books and
No, the Bokanovsky process is with the one where they basically, when they're fertilizing the embryos, I guess, they, split up all the little epsilons, so that way they're basically just, clones of one another, which I find, completely abhorrent.
Yeah, it's just kind of generating bodies for
genetically modifying.
And then they would, purposely, stunt their growth
Mhm.
and their, formation to keep them dumb and compliant.
So they were just more or less pack meals. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is very eerie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because there are, I think that there are some processes that could be somewhat applicable, especially in history, and in particular through Nazism.
Eugenics have always
Where they tried
been,
to do that.
this abhorrent thing that is kind of floated around in real life for, decades. Sorry, not centuries, but, the concept of modifying ourselves, again, is also not, that unfamiliar. So the fact of going to the nth degree of, creating that strata, and just keeping them stuck where they are, and they don't even get a chance to...
Yeah. I also feel like it's more frightening because it's not that far off from where technology currently is.
We can get there,
Yeah,
that's the
it's
frightening
definitely
part.
something that we could potentially be seeing in our lifetimes. Which
Yeah,
is,
I think just
terrifying.
recently in China, there were 2 scientists that were arrested because they were able to tailor make genes in like babies and stuff like that. So yeah, we are not far. That this dystopia is actually not that far off. From
Not at
where
all.
we're
Dystopias
living.
are supposed to serve as warnings. It's a matter of whether or not we abide by these paths, and in this sense, it's being seen in a negative light. And do we want this? And if we don't, then we have to take steps to preventing it. Otherwise, it's going to happen. And I think personally, the process. I read a poem by Joyce Carol Oates about little Albert. It pertains to the experiment where they showed the baby the white rat, but with the opportunity to touch it. But as soon as it started touching, they hit metal with a hammer, and it terrified the baby. So it would apply that to that loud, annoying noise to that and also other white, fluffy objects. And in this case, they did it with books. They used modes of pain and annoyance to make them to make them turned off by books and to nature too. Which one is really the fact that nature is a ticket to freedom and to the fact that if they are closely connected to nature, they're going to go away from their bound up area that they want to keep them.
Yeah, that we've created the organization so much so that it's kind of gone in the opposite direction of it's supposed to help us. We put ourselves in these categories every day. We do it independently though, so now you have the society that is doing it for you. And
Right. Yeah, the caste system.
absolutely and you have no say in the matter, and you're trained to believe that that's a good way of looking at things, is also kind of just like from the gate.
Yeah, one of the things that Huxley talked about years later was the idea of consent, right? That you're giving your consent to this kind of dictatorial life, right? I think there's definitely a lot of that going on
Oh, for sure.
for people.
But using colors for the strata and stuff like that is not a new concept, especially in literature. You have that in Handmaid's Tale. The handmaids that are fertile are in red, and the ones that are the maids are in blue or something like that.
Even
So,
more recently, Divergent, the factions.
Yeah, I
are
was just going
split
to say
up by,
that's in
their
there.
colors,
The Hunger Games, but basically in dystopian.
It's a key piece of dystopia.
Yeah,
Separate the masses, keep them stupid and
Color
ignorant,
code them,
And that's what they're doing with the left and the right too, because they are making it so that the left and the right have a bitter. They almost want us to develop a bitter hatred for one another, and not just a hatred, but intolerance.
Yes.
But
Yes.
them on the top, just remember, if in Supreme Court justice terms, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the late Antonin Scalia, they were two polar opposites on the court. They went to operas together and then went up on the stage and sang together for fun. These people they may fight on the floor, but
That's their job.
yeah, it's their job. But that doesn't mean that we should have the bitter hatred in real life that they are displaying up on top. That's what they want.
Yeah.
They want us to think that we are, and that's what's gonna really.
Well,
That's what's
there's
gonna damage
even
things.
fighting within the same ranks, and just dissension is going to cause the whole entire thing to undo itself. So.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's not so much the case in Brave New World, though.
Yeah, there's a lot of complicity in Brave New World.
But there's
It's
a lot
the
of
opposite.
they've been drugged to think that way. The
Right,
soma.
the soma. Yeah. The feely.
Again, it's your consent is removed. Yeah.
This is why this dystopia is more compliant, is because of they've been drugged to feel this way.
Not unlike today either, right?
No.
There's a lot of
Social media is kind of the
psychotropic.
social
Yeah, but I mean, even
media
just
in general,
psychotropic
they feed us
medication,
whatever they want,
is
whatever
prescribed
the upper people want
all
us
over
to
the
have.
place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
whether it be Xanax for this or Prozac for that.
Yeah, we're only recently kind of saying like, whoa, we need to like figure out what's going on with this kind of stuff and rein that kind of thing, and like the whole entire like war on opioids, and we are giving these medications out and they are useful, but we got to figure out where's the middle ground, so that way we don't have the complicit versus the like the raging issues on either side. So yeah, there is an issue, and we're trying to figure out how to reach a common ground, so we don't hit Aldous Huxley's version of, you know, like the future versus a more pain-ridden one. So
Versus a what?
like a more pain-ridden one, like one that we are denying so many folks, but we've already caused this problem. So that's just, it's a different can of worms. But yeah, no, you are correct.
I know that in 1984, when we were discussing that, we became very passionate in the message. I wanted to bring up the idea of talk about the characters and the story. What did you think about the characters in the story?
I thought it's the weakest part of the novel.
I agree with you. I
I agree.
think that
That's why I'm not sure Huxley hates this world that he's creating, because of the way that he writes about modern times, and like the foreigner, right? Like the guy that comes into this thing is kind of, you know, he's there, but I mean, you can't take him seriously because he's so over the top. His traditions are all confused, right? Like he's a Christian, but then he's also a pagan, you know, where they're doing human sacrifices in this Indian reservation, which is, you know.
Yeah, I think it's a really it's a bad interpretation of like what like modern day like native reserves are gonna be like.
Yeah, I feel like you have to look at that piece of it through the lens of the time period. Like, this book is, like, it's utterly racist. Like, it is, parts of it were, like, hard to read because it's like, ooh, dude, you shouldn't be saying that. But you gotta look at that with, like, the lens of the time period.
Yeah.
So I feel like, through that lens, you can see that reservation just getting exacerbated, and it kind of, like, you can see the traditions all kind of feeding into it.
Because the concept of, like, the one religion, like, that's not new. Like, they do that in a lot of other, like, futuristic sci-fi stuff.
Well, you
like,
say it's not new, but you got to remember this is written in 1912 or something, right? Like this is.
I think it was in 30s.
Yeah, I mean, like, he established
Oh,
it,
yeah.
but it's just like it kind of dubbed it.
It's
it,
the first of its
took a
kind.
weird turn. Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
But I'm
so-
saying like that concept of like looking into the future and seeing like a melting pot of that.
but
So if it's there in the moment.
But yeah, so it's kind of a hodgepodge thing. But like, but you know that I don't like that idea, right? Like what you should do, I think, in that situation, if you're going to take something from the past and put it into this new timeline and see how it stands up, is do a good job of it. Like make the best possible.
Yeah, it wasn't executed well.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't think that this is like. I think the concept is really cool of this. I don't think it's like a flawlessly written book by any means. Like I don't think the writing is
for the
is
time.
great.
It was novel.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
we've had so much time to look at like where is our future going to end up, and have all those unfortunate like cautionary tales of dystopias in varying different forms that range from having zombies, from having still the stratification of the types of workers and the types of like echelons that we end up in. So that's not a new concept, but back when he wrote it, it was kind of novel. It just wasn't well executed.
I still think either which way.
I don't think so.
that
I think he's nefarious. I think that he loves this idea.
Oh yeah.
That's my take.
he's harped on. He's had a sequel to this, revisiting Brave New World,
Yeah.
and then he finished off with Island, which was a utopia. It was about
which they do kind of like foreshadow in this. I did pick up on that because I read Islands like after I read this in high school, and they do like hint at a utopia where they had sent a bunch of people.
Yeah, they sent them to Iceland.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because they talk about that in this book where that's where they send like it's not genocidal in any way. If you become what they call individuated in this Brave New World, they just send you off to an island. It's almost like he's trying to sell it. I mean, this is the way it comes off to me. Is like it's a sales pitch.
It's hard to see where he sits on it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
hard to say.
disagree.
he's against it.
I think that he is very clearly warning us to not become this society. Yeah, I think.
Where?
I think.
I
that-
think like
By using the example of like the undoing with the why can't I remember his name? The kid from the reserve, like
John.
John,
yeah.
thank you. By putting him in and like gumming up the works because he does not fit into a certain strata. He does not fit into any of those. So like he kind of has free reign and he's an individual and he's kind of got stuck into this society and
Yeah, and I think like
I
the
thought
ending.
I had an idea you'd like his jam because he recites Shakespeare.
oh yeah, that was one of the main reasons why I loved reading it in high school and like reading again. I was like, okay, yeah.
But I personally, going off on what we said before, I thought the characters were incredibly stale.
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that
Even for the time, yes.
Yeah, I think that because even 1984, the characterization was somewhat stiff, but at least that message was so engaging, and the situations that they were placed in were so intense and grueling. In this case, I didn't really think so. Having the nonconformists sent to Iceland and
there was no
punishing them
high
in-
stakes
yes.
there. It was kind of like, oh, you get sent away, but you
Yeah.
don't really know what away is. You're sent to an island where you're all allowed to be individuals, and it's just like, how's that bad?
Yeah, like why don't we just send
I was
everybody there?
very detached.
Yeah.
But at least something that interested me was the idea of someone like Lenina having several love interests, and that whole concept of not really being engaged in a committed,
Monogamous,
a
relationship.
committed relationship. That's
Monogamous?
there are plenty of
I mean, that-
species
okay.
that just
With one person.
that
It's
just
like, wait, what? Yeah.
engage in relationships with various people of be it the opposite or the same gender.
Right. They want people to be in a series of transient, meaningless
Because
relationships.
then you don't identify. Because if you're with one person, well, at the very least, you can define yourself by
Right.
saying I'm with them. So if you're just kind of, and this is me not condemning that kind of life. If that's the kind of life you have, do whatever, as long as it's consensual. But like that was one. You form a bond with somebody, and that's going to be a way to identify yourself because you have somebody else to base yourself off of. So it was just one more way of saying, like, go out and be, hedonistic and that kind of stuff.
I also think that it's interesting that they encourage like that kind of a lifestyle in this because it's super passionless. Like there's no like I want to do this because I want to feel good. It's just like, okay, well, we went on a date, so this is what's gonna happen now. Like there's no romance about it or even like
It's
desire.
mechanical,
Yeah. And I think
Again,
that
because if you don't stick with one person, you don't find out their interests because nobody really has any interests because
right.
you're all kind of just cogs in a machine.
But
Going
like
to
take
the
for
Feelies
instance,
taking
like
your
take for
soma
instance like
vacations.
today's society
This
where
illustrates
it is a little bit more like promiscuous, like there is a lot more like casual relationship sort of stuff, but it's based out of like severe
Consensual.
emotion
Yeah.
versus this world where it's completely unfeeling and emotionless. I don't know, I think that was
And
interesting.
I think that on one hand, maybe the fact that these characters were stale or meant to say something, but I still think that they didn't display it well enough.
No, it kind
To
of
a
missed the
point,
mark.
and then you would have needed, like I said, at least that one character to, like the Winston Smith, right? If we're comparing it to 1984, where you have Winston Smith, and he's relatable as like kind of an everyman kind of window into the world, right? The closest thing you get to that in the story is the native, but he's like farcical.
Yeah, he's kind of over the top and
Yeah.
he's juxtaposed.
I
to
also
the
feel
story.
like that is another spot, like place where this misses because at first you're following the one character whose name I've already forgotten.
Does that say anything?
Yeah.
Bernard Marx.
Bernard, yeah, and then like halfway through you kind of shift and now you're watching John, so you can't really get a feel for either of them.
Right, but then you realize Bernard Marx, he was just
He
feeling
just
a
wanted
little
to
out
be
of place.
popular, yeah.
Yeah, once he got something to go in, he was able to fit back in, but then he fell back out again at the end because it didn't work out. But
Right.
so he was like the perfect product in a way, except for the fact that they ended up having to send him to an island. But he was close. He wanted it.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
wasn't a fan of his character.
Well, no, I don't think you're supposed
No,
to be.
I don't think you are, but I think that he was. I mean,
I don't think you're supposed to be a fan.
you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
I mean,
Except the great controller.
I think that
Yeah.
sometimes nonconformists are people that you root for. I could really care less about what happened to him. I thought he was whiny.
Yeah, instead of a nonconformist, right? He came off as a whiny.
Yes,
Yeah.
he was petulant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was a conformist. He was a conformist. He was a wannabe conformist.
Yes.
Yeah, which is potentially worse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
was a
that
lackey.
individuates
But he didn't
his
wanna
character
be.
more unlike.
Yeah.
The other guy, you had that professor type, or that whatever he was, right? The literary man.
Who was that? Mustafa Mond,
Yeah, that's
the like controller guy.
no, below him.
The
guy that
director of
became friends.
hatcheries.
No, the
I
guy
thought
that became
Faber was a better professor.
became
in
friends with
First Control
John.
51.
Oh, okay.
that the other guy, the
Helmholtz.
guy. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, him too. You know, he's just like they're so shallow. Everybody.
I think that, to some extent, that's what they're trying to get at. That's
By
what it's
design.
become.
Right.
But I still think that it is. I'm just preaching to the choir. It's that's what they're. It's not done very well.
The other thing too is right how they take sex and procreation and sever them completely, which helps them to keep everybody just.
Yeah, because then they keep
Destroys
their
the
thumb on
familial
the
unit.
manufacturing. Because then it's
Yeah.
just people that they're manufacturing. There's no
Dis-
connections.
Yeah.
destroys any possible idea of having a purpose to your life, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where they're going with it.
Well,
Again, ruin the
'cause
identity
again,
by destroying the
exactly.
family unit.
You identify, like, if you give birth to a life, you've created life, that's something
It is
that
your
identifies
identity,
you. Yeah,
yeah.
you can become attached to this individual, so that's one more thing to sever, so.
Alright, then, do we have any final thoughts?
I think we pretty much covered it.
Already, how would we rate it? 0 to 5 stars, half stars permitted. Larry?
I go 3.5. I think it's worth reading, but it's a bit of a slog. It's not easy to get through, but I think there's definitely stuff in there that you can relate to today, so it's worth reading to get a little perspective on it.
Kayla?
I agree. I'd say 3.5. I think it's very like poignant in today's political climate and important for everybody to visit.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 3 actually, because I read it again. I read it in high school and loved it in high school. But I think mainly because the John character, like, who loved Shakespeare and all that kind of stuff, I connected with that aspect of it.
That doesn't shock me.
You're right. But reading again, I was just like, we have so many of these stories, unfortunately, nowadays, where it's the cautionary tale of, like, this is the future that we could have, where, like, we were saying, like, the characters are very shallow, and whether that's done on purpose or not, it kind of just falls short of the mark of what I was trying to do, and it's something that I think should be read. I think it is a good basis for that kind of stuff, but I don't think it's like, wow, oh my gosh. Like, there are better kind of versions of the story out there, but it is something that, it's readable, it's an entertaining book, but I was kind of disappointed the second time around, so I was just like, oh.
I'm going 3.5 as well because, as each of you were saying, I do think that the political messages are pretty strong as far as the elements that take place within the text are concerned. But that's the extent of it. I think that 1984 does a much better job at harping on a dystopian atmosphere and at least being able to provide us with an interesting, not necessarily characters, but a story for them to participate. And I don't think that this happens here well enough. And I feel, I feel that is. I just feel that the characters and story, there was no flavor to them.
Yeah.
If you want to say it in that way. But if you're interested in checking out Brave New World, here is my copy. Kaila has the same one. I got
My
mine
digital
from,
copy looks exactly like that, and I'm highly certain the one that we read in high school looked exactly like that
pretty
too.
much. I think this
I think this is a
image
standard copy.
is pretty much standard to the piece, and I got this from my college's bookstore. So. Thank you for tuning into this video. I hope you check out some more videos from our channel, and be sure to join us next time for another episode of Tori Gladiators. For now, keep reading.